The Forgotten Mermaid. All Lost Hearts May Be Redeemed, by Gregga J. Johnn. 6. That particular storm lasted 10 days. The siren spent much of that time hidden from sight, but for the occasional twilight dream walk that drove the shipwrecked crew mildly insane, and then one by one she terrorized them with her seductive snatch and grab. She disappeared from view as soon as the first of the wretched sailors hit land, yet her fire remained, violet, flickering enticement over all who crawled between the rocks onto the sandy shore. They were beaten, bruised, and bloody exhausted. She could have taken them all then, but where was the fun in that? In the darkness of the stormy morning, the crew began to waken in the sand. The weakest of the survivors were dragged up to the sheltered hut on the side of the cliff. A real fire was made in the earthen corner, and they were left there shivering in shock, fever, and delirium. The strongest of the survivors, all 5 of them, set out to discover the secret of the purple flame. They clambered fairly easily up the rough pathway over the cliff face. It was noted that the way was purposely made in the rock by something none of the craftsmen sailors could recognize, and all dreaded to guess. They proceeded with greater caution, and with each whistle of the wind, none of them was sure if the wind was all that they were hearing. She crooned to them a little as she watched from behind the walls of the towering waves that careened and crashed over the rocky shore. Her vision was clearest when she looked through a veil of salt, for although she could at will suspend her fins and use land legs, yet her senses were duller within the dry. In the world of wetness and salt, the siren was near unstoppable. She was the vampire of the waves, designed, built, and evolved as the power behind the ocean. It was a good thing for man that the merfolk steered clear of them, for as much power as man had learned to develop on land, so too the merfolk had done in the waters, but 2 times more so. After all, dry land only takes up 1/3 of the whole earth, leaving 2/3 ocean. In the same way, as much as man had accustomed himself through practice and invention to the way of the waves, so too the mer accustomed themselves through magic and intention to the ways of the land. Thus, when she was upon land, our siren here could move and sense with freedom, yet her movements were slower and more fluid than they seemed speedy and sharp under wave. Also, her hearing was somewhat muted, her vision a blur, and her breathing became belaboured after a short while. However, when she ate, well, that is why she had a secret fortress from which to partake of her tasty meats above the saltiness of the water. There she could eat in peace, savouring every strengthening morsel. So she watched the 5 survivors from within her waves as they clambered up the cliff and slowly crept their way with ridiculous caution to her cauldron. It stood on the cliff top, as a lighthouse might, to give warning and welcome. A welcome indeed into the arms of the waiting rocks and the cavernous mouth of a desolate beach, and with a welcome to their death. The men circled the stone bowl that sat upon a rocky mound like a headstone atop a grave. It was 5 feet by 5 feet wide, and looked to have once contained something less fluid than flame, but still fluid in reflection. They tried reading the symbols about its edge, but the weather had long since masked its truth. She crooned a lullaby at them, and they heard her in the flame. She nodded in greeting with the smile of soft black lips that she kept closed in a kiss for each of their now fevered hearts, for upon seeing her in the mirror of flame, each man began a journey into madness to claim her for their own. Again, she had them right where they belonged, in the flickering edges of her whim. The pursuit continued its raging toss from crest to valley of wave after wave. The preacher was in delirium, and Bryce snorted dismissively as the ill man feverishly muttered prayers and praises and hymns beneath his subconscious breathing. Yet the captain was not without compassion, and sought to make comfortable the missionary wife as best as he could. For her sake, he offered his own quarters to the couple through the days of the storm. She accepted for her husband's sake, and he was transported by the brothers from the swinging hammock below deck up to the wooden and feathered cot of the captain's cabin. The missionary lady sat by her beloved's side day and night, relieved only when Mother D brought food, allowing her a quick breath on deck to use the open-air facilities. Captain Bryce gave her privacy as she climbed out to the prow to cast out the previous day's nourishment from her system through the rope netting that provided such seating over the ocean. The pursuit gave homage to the search for love, and so the missionary lady gripped Athena's figurehead with one arm and the netting by her side with the other hand. Her feet swung carelessly as she paused a moment in solitary and bare-back-sided contemplation. She sighed, breathing in the rain that raged about her. When her mother had died in childbirth, her father, a simple fisherman, had taken her on many of his fishing ventures, so the waves were a second home to her. This storm that rushed about her caused no fear or illness in her heart. Instead, it was invigorating, and she smiled, harmonizing a hum with the screeching air about her. When she clambered back on board to wash up, Bryce nodded at her respectfully. She blushed, and Captain Deleuze thought the colour complimented her eyes. And the storm raged on. Derek and Davies held the ship on her windy course, while Daniel hid away cuddling with the donkey, and Mother D kept everyone's belly satisfied. The preacher continued his delirium, mumbling as his diligent wife took occasional notes of whatever she could make out that he was saying. Captain Bryce watched in wonder of the strong woman, and took to dreaming more of his fantastical quest, curious to see his mermaid desire beginning to take on strangely familiar characteristics. When the 5 strongest survivors returned from exploring the cauldron, the festering conspiracy grew in their hearts. But their ill companions spoke strange words of a nurse-in-waiting who sang health and healing to them, while kissing their fevered brow with dark, luscious lips. The last of the 5 exploring sailors to return to the hut never made it inside. His mates decided to wait out the stormy night and look for him the following morning. There was nothing to be done now. So they slept and dreamed of soft lavender lullabies.